The alarm rang through the observation station like a scream in the dark. Commander Velthar's long fingers moved across the console, his blue skin reflecting the glow of dozens of monitors. He had been watching the stars for 17 cycles, and nothing had ever made his heart race like this signal did now. The message came from Velros Prime, a world far out on the edge of known space. The Kelthran lived there, a peaceful people who spent their days studying philosophy and art. They had no armies. They had no weapons. They had not fought a war in 8,000 years. Now their message filled the command center with words that chilled every being who heard them. We are dying. The Vortan swarm has come. Our shields are failing. Our children are afraid. We have tried everything. Nothing works. Please, someone help us, anyone. Velthar sent the message to the Galactic Council immediately. Within hours, representatives from 50 species gathered in the Great Chamber on the Central World. The room was massive, built to hold beings of all shapes and sizes. Crystalline Orions floated near the ceiling. Massive krill sat on reinforced platforms. The telepathic Mindari clustered together, their thoughts humming in harmony. The council leader, an ancient being named Thexalar, played the message for everyone to hear. The voice of the Kelthran elder cracked with fear and exhaustion. When it ended, silence filled the chamber like a heavy weight. We must discuss this, Thexalar said, his voice echoing from the high ceiling. The Vortan swarm is a grave threat. They have consumed 47 worlds in the past decade. They take everything and leave nothing behind. If we help the Kelthran, we risk drawing the swarm's attention to our own worlds. One by one, the species began to speak. The Orions explained that their bodies were made of living crystal, too fragile for combat. The krill said they reproduced slowly and could not risk their population. The Mindari claimed that violence would shatter their mental connections. The Vistari said their religion forbade them from taking life. The Karathi said they had no experience with warfare. Every species had a reason. Every reason sounded logical. But in the end, all the reasons meant the same thing. They would not help. They would let the Kelthran die. Kate Morrison sat in the back row where the human delegation always sat. Earth had joined the galactic community only 20 years ago. Humans were still considered newcomers, barely trusted with observer status. They had no vote in council decisions. They were supposed to watch and learn and stay quiet. Kate was not good at staying quiet. She was 43 years old with gray starting to show in her dark hair. She had been a soldier before becoming a diplomat, and she still carried herself like one. Straight back, level gaze, hands that looked comfortable holding either a pen or a weapon. She listened to species after species explain why they could not help. She watched beings millions of years older than humanity justify abandoning an entire civilization. She felt something hot and angry building in her chest. When Thexalar prepared to close the session, Kate stood up. The movement was sudden enough that several nearby delegates turned to look at her. Humans were not supposed to speak in full council sessions, but Kate walked down the long aisle toward the center anyway. Ambassador Morrison, Thexalar said, his tone carrying a warning. Humans do not have speaking privileges in this matter. Then give me privileges, Kate said, her voice steady and loud enough to carry through the whole chamber. Or I'll speak without them. A ripple of shock went through the council. Several species made sounds of disapproval, but Thexalar, ancient as he was, had learned that humans were stubborn. He gestured for her to continue. I've listened to everyone explain why they can't help the Kelthran, Kate said. She turned slowly, making eye contact with delegates from every corner of the room. You're too fragile. You're too important. You're too evolved. You're too civilized. You've moved beyond violence. You've transcended warfare. She let the words hang in the air for a moment. The Kelthran are dying right now. Their cities are burning. Their children are screaming. And all of you, with all your advanced technology and ancient wisdom, are going to sit here and do nothing. We have explained our reasons, one of the Mindari said, its voice a chorus of harmonized thoughts. We are not equipped for such primitive activities. Primitive, Kate repeated. She almost laughed. You think fighting to protect the innocent is primitive? You think having the courage to risk yourself for strangers is beneath you? Ambassador Morrison, your tone is inappropriate, Thexalar warned. Kate ignored him. She was already past the point of diplomatic courtesy. Humanity will help them, she said. The words dropped into the chamber like stones into still water. We'll go to Velros Prime, we'll fight the Vortan swarm, we'll buy the Kelthran time to evacuate their people. The chamber erupted. Dozens of species began talking at once. Some laughed at the presumption of the humans. Others expressed concern. A few looked almost relieved that someone else would handle the problem. You understand what you are offering? Thexelar asked. The Vortan swarm has never been defeated. They number in the millions. They are ruthless and efficient. Your species would be sending soldiers to certain death. We understand, Kate said. We're going anyway. But why? The question came from Velthar, who had been watching from the observer stations. Why would humans risk so much for a species you barely know? What do you gain from this? Kate looked at him. She thought about how to explain something that seemed obvious to her but apparently needed to be spelled out to beings who had forgotten what it meant to fight for something. Because they asked for help, she said simply. Because it's the right thing to do. Because if we don't stand up for people who can't defend themselves, what's the point of having the ability to fight at all? She turned back to Thexelar. Humanity doesn't need your permission to respond to a distress call, but we would appreciate your support. Medical supplies, transport ships for evacuees, intelligence on the Vortan swarm, anything you can give us that doesn't require you to actually risk anything. The council chamber fell silent again. Kate could feel them all staring at her, some with disbelief, some with confusion, some with what might have been shame. Very well, Thexelar finally said. If humanity wishes to involve itself in this matter, the council will not prevent it. We will provide support where possible. Kate nodded. She turned and walked back up the aisle toward the human delegation. Her assistant, a younger man named Peter Grant, looked at her with wide eyes. Did you just volunteer Earth to fight an unwinnable war? He whispered. Yes, Kate said. The president is going to lose his mind. Probably. Kate gathered her things and headed for the exit. She had calls to make. A lot of them. Earth's military would need to mobilize fast. Every hour they delayed was another hour the Kelthrans suffered. As she left the council chamber, she heard the delegates beginning to argue behind her. Some thought humanity was noble. Others thought they were fools. Most seemed to think humans were still too primitive to understand that some fights could not be won. Kate did not care what they thought. She reached the communication array and opened a secure channel to Earth. It took a few minutes for the connection to link through the quantum relays. When the president's face appeared on the screen, he looked tired. It was 3 a.m. in Washington. Kate, he said, this better be important. We need to send the fleet to the outer rim, she said without preamble. There's a species under attack. The council won't help them. We're going to. The president stared at her for a long moment. Then he rubbed his face with both hands. How many soldiers will this cost us? He asked. A lot, Kate admitted. Maybe all of them. The enemy is strong and will be outnumbered, but if we don't go, an entire civilization dies. And the council is just going to let them die? They've evolved past the point of caring, Kate said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. The president was quiet. Kate could almost hear him thinking through the political implications, the military costs, the risk to Earth's position in the galactic community. Finally, he looked back at the screen. Send me the details. I'll talk to the Joint Chiefs. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. Thank you, sir. Kate, he said before she could disconnect. Are we sure about this? She thought about the message from Velros Prime, the fear in that elder's voice, the desperation, the plea for anyone to help. Yes, she said. We're sure. The call ended. Kate stood alone in the communication room, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there the Kelthran were waiting. They did not know help was coming. They did not know that humanity had heard their call, but they would know soon. Captain Jake Sullivan sat in his quarters aboard the UESC Defiant when the orders came through. He was playing chess against the ship's computer and losing badly. The message alert interrupted his losing streak with a priority flag that made his stomach tighten. He read the orders twice to make sure he understood them correctly. Then he read them a third time because part of his brain refused to believe what he was seeing. Deploy to Velros Prime. Defend against Vortan swarm. Protect civilian evacuation. Duration of mission unknown. Probability of survival. Low Jake was 38 years old and had been in Earth's space fleet for 20 years. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belt, He had dealt with border disputes near the outer colonies. He had seen combat and knew what it cost. But he had never received orders quite like these before. He stood up and walked to the window of his quarters. The Defiant floated in high orbit above a small moon, one of dozens of human military vessels scattered across this sector. She was a good ship, not the newest or the fastest, but solid and reliable. Her crew knew their jobs. Jake trusted them with his life, which was good because he was about to ask them to risk theirs. He pressed the intercom button. All senior staff to the briefing room. 10 minutes. The responses came back quickly. Acknowledged. On my way. Yes, sir. His crew was efficient. They would need to be. Jake arrived in the briefing room first. He brought up the tactical data on Velros Prime and felt his stomach sink further. The planet was under siege. The Vortan swarm had already taken the outer settlements. They were closing in on the major population centers. Millions of civilians were trapped. The door opened and Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes walked in. She was 35, tall and lean, with sharp green eyes that missed nothing. She had graduated top of her class in tactical operations and had a mind that worked 3 steps ahead of everyone else. This is about the Kelthran situation, she said. It was not a question. How did you know? Jake asked. Because nothing else would make you look that worried. Lisa sat down and pulled up the same data Jake had been studying. Her eyes moved across the screens quickly. We're going to fight the Vortan swarm. Orders just came through. How many ships? 6 plus ground forces. About 2,000 soldiers total. Lisa looked at the estimated Vortan numbers. Millions of hostiles. Advanced bioweapons. No known weaknesses. She let out a slow breath. Well, she said, this will be interesting. The others arrived quickly. Sergeant Danny Cross came in looking calm and untroubled, which was how Danny always looked. He was 41 and had spent his whole adult life in combat zones. Nothing seemed to shake him. He nodded to Jake and Lisa and took a seat. Dr. Amy Foster rushed in carrying a medical tablet and looking harried, which was how Amy always looked. She was the youngest of the senior staff at 29, but she had more field experience than doctors twice her age. She had volunteered for every dangerous assignment the fleet offered. Chief Engineer Ryan Blake was last to arrive. He was a broad-shouldered man of 33 who looked like he could bend steel with his bare hands. He probably could. Ryan treated the ship's engines like they were his children, and could keep anything running through pure stubbornness and creative thinking. Jake waited until they were all seated. Then he brought up the mission details on the main display. 2 days ago, the Galactic Council received a distress call from the Kelthran civilization. They're under attack by the Vortan swarm. The Council voted not to help them. Ambassador Morrison volunteered humanity to respond. Of course she did, Lisa said with a slight smile. We're taking the Defiant and 5 other ships to Velros Prime. Our mission is to hold off the Vortan swarm long enough for the Kelthran to evacuate their civilians. Intelligence estimates we'll be facing between 2 and 5 million hostiles. Ryan whistled softly. And how many are we bringing? 2,000 soldiers. 6 ships. Whatever supplies we can carry. The room was quiet for a moment. Danny was the first to speak. So we're the distraction, he said. We keep the swarm busy while the civilians run. That's the mission, Jake confirmed. How long do we need to hold? Amy asked. 72 hours minimum. Longer if possible. Against millions of hostiles. Lisa was already working through calculations in her head. We'll need to be smart about positioning. Use the terrain. Make them come to us in ways that negate their numbers. The Kelthran have technology we can use, Jake said. Advanced shields, sensors, power systems. But they have no weapons. No military. They haven't fought a war in 8,000 years. So we'll have to teach them, Danny said. Fast, can we win this? Amy asked quietly. Jake met her eyes. He had always been honest with his crew, even when the truth was hard. Probably not, he said. But we can buy time. We can save lives. That's what matters. When do we leave? Ryan asked. 6 hours. Tell your people to pack light and pack smart. We might not have resupply once we're in the combat zone. The meeting ended. The senior staff filed out to prepare their sections. Lisa stayed behind. You okay? She asked Jake. No, he admitted. I just signed all of us up for what might be a suicide mission. We signed up for this when we joined the fleet, Lisa said. We knew the risks. Everyone on this ship volunteered to be here. That doesn't make it easier. No, it doesn't. Lisa stood to leave, then paused. Jake, the Kelthran are pacifists, philosophers, artists. They've built a whole civilization on the idea that violence is never the answer. And now they're dying because they can't defend themselves. Your point. My point is that maybe they're wrong. Maybe sometimes violence is the answer. Maybe sometimes you need people willing to fight so that others don't have to. She smiled slightly. I'm glad we're those people. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of activity. The Defiant and 5 other ships loaded supplies, ammunition, medical equipment, and rations. 2,000 soldiers boarded the transports along with their weapons and gear. Engineers ran final checks on all systems. Medical staff prepared field hospitals. Jake stood on the bridge and watched the preparations through the main view screen. The other ships in the task force were good vessels with experienced crews. The UESC Guardian was slightly larger than the Defiant and carried most of their heavy weapons. The UESC Sentinel was fast and maneuverable. The UESC Ranger, Phoenix, and Atlas rounded out the fleet. All ships report ready, Lisa said from the tactical station. Jake took a deep breath. This was it. No turning back now. All ships, this is Captain Sullivan. Plot course for Velros Prime, maximum speed. We have people waiting for us. The ships jumped to hyperspace, leaving Earth's territory behind. The journey would take 2 weeks. Jake used that time to prepare his people. Every day the soldiers trained. They practiced combat drills. They studied Vorton tactics based on the limited intelligence available. They learned about Kelthran culture so they would know who they were fighting for. Jake held meetings with squad leaders. He walked through the ship and talked to the soldiers. He wanted them to understand what they were heading into. No false hope. No sugarcoating, just the truth. We're going up against an enemy that outnumbers us thousands to one, he told them. We're going to be tired, scared, and probably running low on everything, but we're also going to be standing between millions of innocent people and something that wants to destroy them. That matters. That's worth fighting for. On the 8th day of travel, they received a transmission from Velros Prime. An elderly Kelthran appeared on the screen. His skin was pale purple and his large eyes were filled with hope and fear. Human ships, he said, his voice shaking slightly. This is Elder Quendara of Velros Prime. We received word that you are coming to help us. We cannot express our gratitude. We are preparing evacuation transports, but the swarm is closing in. Our shields will not hold much longer. Jake stepped forward. Elder Quendara, this is Captain Jake Sullivan. We'll be there in 6 days. Hold on. We're coming. The Kelthran elder's eyes grew moist. You are traveling across the galaxy to fight for strangers, to risk your lives for people you have never met. We do not understand this, but we are grateful beyond words. You'd do the same for us, Jake said. I wish that were true, Quendara replied sadly, but we do not know how to fight. We abandoned such knowledge long ago, believing we had evolved beyond the need for it. Now we see our mistake. After the transmission ended, Lisa looked at Jake. He seems like a good person. Yeah, Jake agreed. Makes it easier to know we're fighting for someone worth saving. The final days of travel were the hardest. Everyone knew what was coming. The soldiers checked their weapons repeatedly. The medical staff inventoried supplies. The engineers made sure every system was running perfectly. Danny found Jake in the observation deck late one night. They stood together watching the stars streak by in hyperspace. You ever wonder if we're crazy? Danny asked. Flying toward impossible odds to help people we don't know? All the time, Jake admitted. Good. That means we're sane enough to know it's crazy, but committed enough to do it anyway. Danny smiled slightly. That's exactly the kind of people this mission needs. On the 14th day, the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Velros system. The tactical screens immediately lit up with contacts. 410 ships swarmed around the inner planets like insects, the surface of. The city of Kelsana had stood for 6,000 years. Its towers reached toward the sky like prayers made of crystal and light. Gardens grew on every level, filled with flowers that bloomed in colors humans had no names for. The Kelthran had built a paradise dedicated to art, philosophy, and peace. Now that paradise was burning, Jake stood on a rooftop overlooking the evacuation zone and watched the horizon. Smoke rose from a dozen districts. In the distance, he could see movement. The Vortan swarm was coming, a dark mass that flowed across the ground like a wave of nightmares. Positions look good, Lisa said through his earpiece. She was in the temporary command center 3 blocks away. coordinating all human forces. We've got overlapping fields of fire on every approach. Danny's teams are in position. Medical stations are ready. We're as prepared as we're going to get. How long until the civilians are evacuated? Jake asked. First transports lift off in 20 minutes. Full evacuation will take at least 72 hours, maybe longer. Jake did the math in his head. 72 hours of holding against an enemy that outnumbered them by thousands to one. He had led difficult missions before, but nothing like this. Below him in the main square, thousands of Kelthran civilians waited in orderly lines. They moved slowly, helping the elderly and carrying children. Even facing death, they maintained the calm dignity that defined their species. Jake found himself admiring them. A young Kelthran approached him. The alien was tall and thin, with the same pale purple skin as Elder Quendara. He carried what looked like a scanning device. Captain Sullivan, the Kelthran said. I am Sir An. Elder Quendara asked me to assist you in any way possible. Can you fight? Jake asked. No, Sir An admitted. I am a scholar of ancient history. But I can learn. I can help. Please let me do something. Jake studied him for a moment. The young Kelthran's eyes held determination mixed with fear. He was terrified, but trying not to show it. Stay close to Sergeant Cross, Jake said. Do what he tells you. Don't take unnecessary risks. Understood? Yes, Captain. Thank you. The first Vortan reached the outer perimeter 30 minutes later. Danny Cross watched them through his rifle scope, from a position on a bridge overlooking the main approach. His team was spread out in carefully chosen positions, ready to turn the street below into a kill zone. Contact, Danny said calmly into his radio. Estimate 200 hostiles approaching from the east. Jake had studied the intelligence reports on Vortan warriors, but seeing them in person was different. They stood 8 feet tall on 4 powerful legs. Their bodies were covered in thick armor that looked like it had grown from their skin. Each warrior carried bioweapons that could melt through steel. They moved with confidence, used to easy victories. Hold fire, Danny ordered his team. Let them get close. Wait for my signal. The Vortan advanced down the street. They showed no caution, no fear. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They expected no real resistance. They had never fought humans before. Now, Danny said. The street erupted with gunfire. Human soldiers opened up from windows, rooftops, and hidden positions. The Vortan at the front of the group fell immediately, cut down before they could react. The ones behind them scrambled for cover, finally realizing they were in a real fight. Keep pressure on them, Danny called. Don't let them organize. The battle for the first approach lasted 20 minutes. By the end, the street was littered with Vortan bodies. Not a single human had been injured, but Danny knew this was just the beginning. They're testing us, he said to his team, learning what we can do. The real attack is coming. He was right. An hour later, the Vortan came in force. They hit all 4 approaches simultaneously, thousands of warriors advancing behind heavy weapons and armored units. The sound of their movement was like thunder. All positions weapons free, Jake ordered. Make every shot count. The battle exploded across the entire perimeter. Human soldiers fired from prepared positions, their weapons cutting down Vortan warriors by the dozens. But for everyone that fell, 3 more took its place. The swarm just kept coming. Lisa coordinated the defense from the command center, moving reinforcements where they were needed, calling in support from the ships in orbit. Her voice stayed calm even as the tactical displays showed enemy forces pressing in from all sides. Guardian, this is command. We need fire support on Sector 7. Danny's team is getting overwhelmed. The UESC Guardian, still in low orbit, opened fire. Beams of energy lanced down from the sky, striking Vortan positions with devastating accuracy. The assault on Sector 7 faltered, giving Danny's team time to regroup. Thanks for the help, Danny said. That was getting interesting. On the southern approach, a group of Vortan broke through the first defensive line. They charged toward a medical station where Amy Foster was treating wounded soldiers. The doctor looked up, saw them coming, and calmly picked up a rifle. Get the wounded to the back room, she told her staff. Then she stepped into the doorway and started firing. Amy had trained as a combat medic, which meant she knew how to fight as well as heal. She dropped the first 3 Vortan before they knew what was happening. The rest took cover, surprised to find resistance at what they thought was an undefended target. A squad of human soldiers arrived 2 minutes later to reinforce the position. They found Amy still in the doorway, her rifle empty but her patient safe. Dr. Foster is officially terrifying, one of the soldiers said into his radio. Noted, Lisa replied with a hint of amusement in her voice. As the sun set on the first day, the Vortan pulled back to regroup. Jake walked the defensive lines, checking on his soldiers. They were tired and low on ammunition, but still fighting. More importantly, they had held. The evacuation was proceeding on schedule. Elder Quendara found Jake near the command center. The old Kelthran looked shocked. "You stopped them," he said, wonder in his voice. "We have never seen anything like this. The Vortan have conquered so many worlds. They have never faced real resistance. But you made them retreat." "We slowed them down," Jake corrected. "They'll be back, probably with more forces and better tactics. Still, you have given us hope. The first transports are away with 50,000 civilians. Because of you, those people will live." Jake nodded. 50,000 saved. 46,950,000 to go. The second day was worse than the first. The Vortan adapted their tactics. They brought in heavy bioweapons that could punch through human defenses. They attacked in waves, never giving the defenders time to rest or resupply. Ryan Blake worked miracles in the engineering section of the Defiant. With the ship in low orbit and taking constant fire from Vortan anti-ship weapons, he kept the shields up and the weapons firing. When primary power failed, he rerouted secondary systems. When secondary systems failed, he used emergency backups. When those failed, he got creative. "This should not be possible," one of his engineers said, staring at the power readings. "Good thing I don't care about should," Ryan replied. "Connecting cables that were never meant to be connected. I care about keeping this ship in the fight." On the ground, the humans were running low on everything: ammunition, medical supplies, energy for their weapons. But they kept fighting. Every hour they held meant more civilians evacuated. Danny's team held a critical intersection that controlled access to 3 different evacuation zones. The Vortan threw wave after wave of warriors at them. Danny's soldiers fought with rifles until they ran out of bullets, then switched to sidearms. When the sidearms ran empty, they used knives. When the knives broke, they used rocks, pieces of broken buildings, anything they could find. Sir-An watched in amazement as the humans fought. He had never seen violence before, had never imagined that beings could fight with such intensity. But he also saw something else. He saw humans pulling wounded comrades to safety, sharing their last food and water, fighting to protect Kelthran civilians they had never met. "Why do you do this?" he asked Danny during a brief lull in the fighting. "You could retreat. Save yourselves. Why stay?" Danny was reloading his rifle with his last magazine of ammunition. He looked tired and had blood on his uniform, though none of it seemed to be his. "Because someone has to," Danny said simply. "Because your people need help and we're the only ones who answered. Because some things are worth fighting for, even if it costs your life, especially then." Danny chambered around and checked his sights. The things worth dying for are usually the things worth living for. Your people, their art, their philosophy, their way of life. That's all worth protecting. Sir-An was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up a fallen human weapon. "Teach me," he said. "I do not want to just watch anymore. I want to help." Danny looked at the young Kelthran. Then he smiled slightly and began explaining how the rifle worked. By the end of the second day, the human forces had taken heavy casualties. Nearly 40% of the soldiers were dead or too wounded to fight, but they had held. The evacuation was 60% complete. 28 million Kelthran had escaped. Jake sat in what was left of the command center and looked at the tactical displays. Lisa sat beside him running calculations. "We can't hold for another day," she said quietly. "We don't have enough soldiers. We're almost out of ammunition. The Vortan will overrun us, I know," Jake said, "but if we pull back now, millions will die." The fourth day began with rain. It fell in heavy drops that mixed with the smoke and ash, turning everything gray. Jake stood at what remained of the defensive perimeter and watched the Vortan gathering for another assault. They had learned patience. They knew the humans were running out of everything. "Status report," Jake said into his radio. The responses came back from around the defensive zone, each one worse than the last. Ammunition critically low, food and water nearly gone, medical supplies exhausted. Less than 600 soldiers still able to fight, and most of them were wounded in some way. "We have maybe 4 hours of fighting left in us," Lisa said from the command center. "After that, we're down to rocks and harsh language." "Then we make those 4 hours count," Jake replied. But the Vortan had other plans. Intelligence reports started coming in about massive Vortan forces gathering to the north. Not just ground troops, heavy assault units. Creatures the size of tanks with weapons that could level buildings. "They're done playing with us," Danny said from his position. He was down to 15 soldiers in his unit. All of them wounded, all of them still ready to fight. This next assault is going to be the big one. Jake knew Danny was right. The Vortan had tested the human defenses, learned their tactics, and identified their weaknesses. Now they were going to crush them with overwhelming force. All units prepare for major assault from the north. Concentrate remaining ammunition on heavy targets. Make every shot count. Lisa worked frantically at her console, trying to find some advantage. The tactical situation was impossible. They needed help, but there was no help coming. The fleet was crippled. Air support was gone. They were on their own. "Wait," she said suddenly. "I've got an idea. It's dangerous and probably insane, but it might work." "I'm listening," Jake said. "The Defiant still has weapons. The ship is barely holding together and can't stay in low orbit much longer. But Ryan thinks he can keep it flying for one more run. If we bring it down for a close atmospheric strike on the Vortan staging area, we might be able to break up their assault before it starts." Jake felt his stomach tighten. That would expose the ship to every Vortan anti-ship weapon in the area. "They'll tear it apart." "I know, but it might buy us enough time to complete the evacuation." Jake switched channels. "Defiant, this is Sullivan. Put me through to Captain Bennett." Captain Claire Bennett appeared on his screen. She was 45 years old and had been commanding ships for 20 years. The Defiant was her first love, and Jake was asking her to risk it in a nearly suicidal attack run. "I already know what you're going to ask," Claire said, "and the answer is yes. We'll make the run. Claire, they'll hit you with everything they have. The ship might not make it." "The ship's already half dead," Claire said with a tired smile. "Might as well make the other half count for something. Besides, my crew didn't come all this way to hide in orbit while you fight down there." "Thank you," Jake said quietly. "Thank us by getting those civilians out." Defiant out. The massive ship descended through the atmosphere like a wounded bird. Vortan weapons opened fire immediately. Energy beams and biomissiles struck the Defiant's shields. The shields held for maybe 30 seconds before failing. Then the weapons hit the hull directly. Ryan Blake screamed orders at his engineering team, rerouting power, sealing breaches, doing everything possible to keep the ship together. Explosions rocked through multiple decks. The ship was dying around them, but Ryan refused to let it die yet. "Just a little longer," he muttered, his hands flying across damaged controls. "Come on, girl. Stay with me." The Defiant reached the Vortan staging area and opened fire. Every weapon the ship had left unleashed at once: missiles, lasers, railguns. The Vortan forces below never had a chance. The staging area erupted in a massive fireball visible from orbit. Then the Vortan anti-ship weapons found their mark. A massive explosion tore through the Defiant's engineering section. Ryan looked up to see fire and vacuum rushing toward him. He had just enough time to hit the emergency seal button, saving his team in the next compartment before the section depressurized. Claire felt the ship shudder and knew what it meant. They had lost main engineering, lost Ryan, lost any hope of staying in the air. She activated the ship-wide intercom one last time. "All hands, this is the captain. We're going down. Brace for impact. It's been an honor serving with you." The Defiant fell from the sky and crashed into an empty district 2 miles from the evacuation zone. The impact carved a trench through the city. When the smoke cleared, the ship was a broken wreck. But it had completed its mission. The Vortan assault was broken. Jake watched the ship fall and felt something twist in his chest. Good people had just died buying time for others to live. He wanted to mourn, to stop and honor their sacrifice. But there was no time. The evacuation had to continue. "Get rescue teams to the crash site," he ordered. "Anyone who survived that crash needs immediate medical attention." Amy Foster led the medical team toward the wreckage. The rain had stopped, leaving everything covered in a layer of wet ash. The Defiant's hull was still hot, twisted metal glowing red in places. Amy's team moved carefully through the debris, searching for survivors. They found Claire Bennett in what remained of the bridge. She was badly injured but alive. Amy and her team worked quickly to stabilize her, treating burns and broken bones with the few supplies they had left. "The ship?" Claire asked weakly. "She's gone," Amy said gently. "But she took a lot of them with her. You saved a lot of lives today, Ryan." Amy's expression gave Claire the answer before she spoke. The captain closed her eyes and turned her head away. They found 37 survivors from the Defiance crew, less than 20% of the people who had been aboard. Amy got them to the field hospital and did what she could with almost no supplies. She was so tired she could barely stand, but she kept working. Soldiers kept bringing her wounded. She kept saving them. By midday, the human defensive perimeter had shrunk to less than a quarter of its original size. Danny's unit was down to 8 soldiers. They held a single intersection, but it was a critical one. If it fell, the Vortan would have a direct line to the main evacuation point. Ser-On fought beside Danny now. The young Kelthran had learned fast. He would never be as skilled as the human soldiers, but he was brave and willing. That counted for a lot. More coming from the east, Ser-On called out. He had good eyes and could spot enemy movement before the humans could. Danny's team opened fire. They had maybe 20 rounds of ammunition per soldier left. After that, it would be hand-to-hand fighting. Danny had already fixed his bayonet. So had the others. The Vortan warriors charged. The humans fired carefully, making each shot count. Vortan bodies fell, but more kept coming. The distance closed. 50 meters, 30, 20. Fix bayonets, Danny ordered calmly. The Vortan reached their position. What followed was brutal and desperate. Humans fighting with knives and bayonets and anything they could grab. Ser-On swung a piece of metal pipe, protecting a wounded soldier who could no longer fight. The Kelthran was terrified but refused to run. The fight lasted maybe 5 minutes but felt like hours. When it was over, the intersection was still in human hands. But Danny's team was down to 5 soldiers, all wounded. All out of ammunition. How much longer do we need to hold? Danny asked over the radio. Lisa checked the evacuation status. 6 more hours. Maybe 7. The last transports are loading now. 6 hours, Danny repeated. He looked at his soldiers. His friends. People he had fought beside for years. We can do that. Jake knew they couldn't. Not with the forces they had left. Not against the numbers the Vortan were bringing. He needed a miracle or a sacrifice. Probably both. All units fall back to final defensive positions around the evacuation site. We're consolidating. Make them come to us. The human forces pulled back, moving carefully through the ruined city. The Vortan followed, sensing victory. They had broken the human fleet. Destroyed their heavy weapons. Reduced their numbers to almost nothing. Now they just had to finish the job. Jake gathered his remaining soldiers at the main evacuation site. Less than 400 people still able to fight. Looking at them, Jake felt a mixture of pride and sorrow. They were exhausted, wounded, out of ammunition and supplies, but every single one of them was still ready to fight. Listen up, Jake said. His voice was hoarse from breathing smoke and shouting orders. The last transports lift off in 6 hours. That's how long we need to hold. I won't lie to you. The odds are bad. Most of us probably won't make it. But those transports are carrying 47 million people. People who are alive because we came here. Because we stood up and said we wouldn't let them die. He looked at each face, memorizing them. When this is over, the galaxy is going to know what happened here. They're going to know that humanity answered a call for help. That we fought impossible odds to protect the innocent. That we held the line when everyone else walked away. And they're going to know that every one of you was a hero. The soldiers didn't cheer. They were too tired for that. But Jake saw them straighten up. Saw determination replace exhaustion in their eyes. They knew what was being asked of them. They would do it anyway. The Vortan launched their final assault an hour later. They came from every direction at once. Millions of warriors converging on the last human. The medical ship was quiet except for the sounds of machines keeping people alive. Jake lay in a bed. His side wrapped in bandages where the Vortan weapon had hit him. 3 broken ribs and internal bleeding. The doctor said he was lucky. Looking around at the beds holding what was left of his unit, Jake did not feel lucky. Of the 2,000 soldiers who had gone to Velros Prime, less than 800 had come back. Ships that had been full of life and energy on the way there now felt empty and hollow on the return journey. The price had been exactly as high as Jake had feared, but they had saved 47 million Kelthran. That number kept running through Jake's mind. 47 million people who were alive because humans had answered a call for help. It should have made the cost worth it. Some days it did. Other days Jake just felt tired. Lisa Hayes found him 3 days into the journey home. She walked with a slight limp from a leg wound but had refused to stay in bed. She pulled up a chair beside Jake's bed and sat down carefully. The fleet's asking for after-action reports, she said. I told them you were still recovering. I'm fine, Jake said. You're a terrible liar. Lisa looked at him with concern. How are you really doing? Jake was quiet for a moment. I keep thinking about the pilots who died protecting those transports. Ryan Blake and his team in engineering. All the soldiers who didn't make it. I knew some of them for years. Now they're gone. They died doing something that mattered, Lisa said. That doesn't make it hurt less, but it means something. Does it? We lost almost 2/3 of our people, Lisa. For a species we barely knew. For a planet we'd never visited before. The council didn't think it was worth it. Maybe they were right. No. Lisa's voice was sharp. They were wrong. The council let their fear of the Vortan stop them from doing what was right. We didn't. That's the difference between us and them. Jake nodded slowly. He wanted to believe that. Some days he did. The medical ship docked at a Kelthran refugee station 4 days later. The Kelthran had established temporary homes for their evacuated population across several space stations and friendly worlds. The refugees had lost their planet, but they were alive. That was something. Elder Quendara came to visit the wounded humans. The old Kelthran moved through the medical bay slowly, stopping at each bed to speak with the soldiers. When he reached Jake, he bowed deeply. Captain Sullivan, I have no words adequate to express our gratitude. Your people gave everything to save mine. We will never forget this. How are your people adjusting? Jake asked. It is difficult. Many are in shock. We have lost our home, our history, everything we built over thousands of years. But we are alive. Our children are alive. That is because of you. Quendara sat down, his movements careful. I have been thinking much about what happened on Velros Prime. My people believed we had evolved beyond the need for violence. We thought that by abandoning warfare, we had achieved something noble. But we were wrong. We confused peace with helplessness. We thought not fighting meant we were civilized, but really we had just made ourselves unable to protect what we loved. You were trying to build something better, Jake said. Perhaps. But in doing so, we made ourselves vulnerable to those who never stopped fighting. The Vortan swarm exists because species like mine removed ourselves from the equation of violence. We let others do the hard work of standing against darkness while we enjoyed our enlightened peace. The elder's large eyes were sad. It took your people, these humans we thought were primitive, to show us the truth. What truth is that? That peace is not the absence of warriors. It is the presence of people willing to fight for it. You humans understand this in a way we had forgotten. Jake thought about that. He had never really considered why humans still fought when other species did not. It had always seemed natural to him. Some things needed defending. Some threats needed facing. Someone had to stand up. What will your people do now? Jake asked. We will rebuild, Quendara said, on a new world far from Vortan space. But we will rebuild differently. We are asking humans to teach us, not to become warriors like you, but to understand how to defend ourselves, how to protect what matters. Is that something you would help with? Jake looked at the elder, at the hope and determination in those alien eyes. The Kelthran had learned a hard lesson, but they had learned it. They were willing to change. Yes, Jake said. We'll help. 2 weeks later, Jake was cleared to leave medical care. He walked with a cane and tired easily, but the doctors said he would recover fully with time. He made his way to the observation deck of the station and found Danny Cross there, looking out at the stars. Danny turned as Jake approached. The sergeant's left arm was in a sling and he had a new scar running down one side of his face. But he was alive. That was more than Jake had dared hope for during those final hours on Velros Prime. Captain, Danny said with a slight nod. Just Jake, he replied. We're off duty. Old habits. Danny turned back to the window. You know they're calling us heroes back on Earth? The survivors of Velros Prime. They're talking about medals and parades. How do you feel about that? Conflicted. Half our friends died down there. Doesn't feel like something to celebrate. But 47 million people are alive. I know. Danny was quiet for a moment. You think it was worth it? Trading human lives for alien ones we'd never met? Jake had asked himself that question 1,000 times. He still did not have a perfect answer. I think we did what no one else would do. I think we stood up when everyone else sat down. I think we saved millions of lives. Whether that's worth the cost? Jake trailed off. That's something every person has to answer for themselves. Danny nodded slowly. The Kelthran kid, Saran. He wants to join Earth's military. Says he wants to learn from us. Learn how to protect his people the way we protected them. What did you tell him? I told him it's not about learning to fight. It's about learning when to fight, knowing the difference between violence and defense, between cruelty and protection. Danny looked at Jake. Think he'll understand that? I think he already does. He fought beside us. He saw what it cost. Anyone who's been through that understands. They stood together in silence, watching the stars. Jake thought about the battle, about the soldiers who had not come home, about the families on Earth who would receive news that their loved ones had died on a distant world for strangers. It hurt. It would always hurt. But he also thought about the Kelthran children who would grow up because of what happened on Velros Prime, about a civilization that would survive and rebuild and remember, about how humanity had shown the galaxy that some things were worth fighting for. Amy Foster found them an hour later. The doctor looked exhausted but satisfied. She had spent the past 2 weeks treating wounded soldiers and teaching Kelthran medical staff about human trauma procedures. They're fast learners, Amy said, joining them at the window. The Kelthran medical staff. They've got technology we can only dream of, but they never had to deal with combat trauma before. Now they're adapting their methods, combining their tech with our practical experience. How many did we lose in the end? Jake asked quietly. Amy's expression became somber. Final count is 1,237 casualties. That includes killed in action and those who died from their wounds. We have 543 with serious injuries, 220 relatively unharmed. The numbers hit Jake like physical blows. More than half of the people under his command were dead. More than half would never see home again. They're talking about building a memorial, Amy continued, on the Kelthran's new homeworld, a place to remember everyone who fell, both human and Kelthran. The Kelthran lost people too? Danny asked. Yes. In the final days, some of them fought beside us. Young ones mostly, who couldn't bear to just evacuate while we died for them. Saran's group wasn't the only one. We lost about 300 Kelthran who took up weapons to help defend their people. Jake felt something shift in his understanding. He had thought of the Kelthran as helpless civilians, people who needed protecting. But some of them had fought, had died beside the humans, had proven that courage was not unique to any one species. They're changing, Amy said. The Kelthran. I've talked to a lot of them while treating patients. They're questioning everything they believed about peace and violence. Some are angry at their own leaders for not teaching them how to defend themselves. Others are struggling to reconcile their philosophy with the reality of what happened. That must be hard, Jake said. It is, but they're facing it. That takes courage too. A message alert sounded on Jake's communicator. He checked it and felt his eyebrows rise. The Galactic Council wants to meet with the human delegation. All surviving senior officers are requested to attend. Think they want to yell at us? Danny asked. Probably, Lisa said, walking up behind them. She had been listening from the doorway. Or thank us, or both. With the council, you never know. The meeting was held 2 days later in the council chambers on the Central World. Jake walked in wearing his dress uniform. Medals he had earned over 20 years of service displayed on his chest. Lisa, Danny, and Amy walked beside him, along with a dozen other senior officers who had survived. The chamber was full. Representatives from all 50 species watched as